Hello and welcome back guys to a new Kerbin Space Program video with Spaceship. So as pretty much always, starting off with a nice beautiful launch from the launch pad at around 4 times regular speed. So today, if you haven't guessed already from the title, we're going to Tylo, aka the Jool system. So, well, the question is, why am I going there? Well, apart from not having been to the Jool system since the new update, the main reason is that yesterday actually, on the official Kerbin Space Program server, no, I forgot the name, not Reddit server, how's the other thing called? Yeah, exactly, Discord server. I saw some people talking about gravity assists because one of the newer players was going out to Jool. So I decided, let's go to Jool as well, because why not giggles? So yeah. By the way, my launch vehicle is a bit overpowered if you ask me. I mean, we got into LKO with only the booster stage, so it was mainly a SST actually. But having too much fuel is never a bad idea. So the design is a rather straightforward design, since I didn't really plan it into too much detail and so on and so forth. So, but yeah, first up, today I'm actually going to talk about a bit about maneuver nodes and how to use some tiny amounts of gravity assist. So after getting the regular encounter from Kerbin with Jool, I plotted an in-flight mid-course correction, which you can see here, which will utilize Tylo's gravity to capture us into the Jovian system. For that you have to go, as you can see here right now, the line being plotted, go behind the, well, you have to go in front of the, sorry, my bad there, in front of the body, in front of the movement direction of the body. So we're going like passing in front of Tylo there to slow us down into the Jool system. That's more or less the main essence if you're trying to slow down or accelerate. If accelerating, then obviously the other way around, like you probably have seen me doing a couple of times around the moon. So now, fast forwarding a couple of years, the transit time's over, we are flying nice into the Jool system and heading for our first Tylo encounter. So, if we are already here at the Jovian system, where you can really go, where you have a great opportunity to practice gravity assists and playing around with them and figuring things out for yourself, I decided, well, why not go and get some practice myself. So I slowed ourselves down a couple of times by flying past Tylo into a total like 3 gravity assists just to get our orbit a bit closer down, even though we would have enough fuel to do a complete burn capture. I decided, why not, let's just do it. So now you can see actually the last time we entered the sphere of influence of Tylo, because we're slowing down with our 8 beautiful nuclear engines, so we have a lot of fuel there. So just going for a nice low orbit to prepare ourselves for the lander. Well, at some point we'll ditch those 4 external boosters, so we're down to 4 nuclear engines. Now, speaking of Tylo, just a small notion, apart from having a beautiful look and view from the surface, and generally the Jool system is very beautiful to visit, so definitely go check it out. And the other thing kind of about Tylo is actually the hardest, or the moon with the largest gravity and no atmosphere, so it needs around 2000 meters per second of orbital velocity in low orbit, in low Tylo orbit, so it's very close to the actual kind of mass and requirements of Kerbin. Well, anyways, actually you saw there me deploying a small satellite that we brought along with us, a relay satellite. The initial plan was to drop it somewhere in orbit around, high orbit around Tylo, but I was a bit forgetful and just left it in some medium-sized orbit, so it's not that high, but it's not really, it's not that low, but it's definitely not high enough for my first initial thoughts. But the satellite was just because we had some spare docking port on top of the lander, so why not bring it along with us. So speaking of the lander design, so I'm going to talk about, well, since we're approaching the landing, and I'm at the beginning very zoomed out since I want to land at a nice spot where you can see Jool in the background, kind of very close to the equator, and because Tylo is tidally locked, we kind of, it is very specific, rather specific location where to land at. So the main craft has a 1-3 command pod so that our Kerbals here have enough space, but the lander itself is one of the Making History DLC pods, Gemini type of command pods, so we can bring comfortably to Kerbin with us. The first stage of the lander was primarily, or is actually, designed to kind of slow us down in terms of down into a suborbital trajectory, and be ditched rather early on during the, well, just regular deceleration to scrub off some velocity. So these 4 Terrier LV899 Terrier engines actually do not provide enough thrust to land. They have only a thrust to mass ratio of around now, what was it, 0.6 or 0.7 depending on the fuel level, maybe 8 if you get really empty. So this one small fuel tank was fitting into those 4 mounted fuel tanks on the side. But like I said, the entire thought of this is just to scrub off some velocity, get us into a suborbital trajectory, and then kick in the 4 and 5 main engines, which will do the most of the heavy lifting. So those 4 radially mounted boosters on the side, feeding the aerospike engines, because they have a very good thrust to weight ratio, that's why I brought them with us, are providing most of the thrust, because this way we can really decelerate a lot quicker, and that's really helpful with this rather strong gravity. The Cheetah, a DLC engine in the center as well, providing good amount of thrust as well as some steering capabilities. But speaking of high gravity, as you can see here, we're coming in really hot, really fast down, so try to reduce our vertical velocity, but it was not quite enough. We were very nice and slow in terms of vertical velocity, but way too fast in terms of horizontal velocity, and that's how you can see, well, it wasn't that bad, frankly speaking. Nothing broke, but we are in an uncontrollable spin here and we will crash. So just because it's kind of funny how we skimmed along the surface without actually blowing up, without being blowing up, I decided to leave this small footage in here. But after a quick reload to the landing approach, nothing too bad. It was a rather funny thing. But now back to the new save. Well, new save just slightly earlier before touchdown. I just pointed up to the radially out a bit earlier, so that way we had more spare time before hitting the surface, and that way we had no issues whatsoever to slow down in time. Now you can see here Jool in the background right above the horizon, or kind of even halfway below the horizon, and that's not exactly, but more or less the location that I was actually aiming for. So we actually made a pretty perfect landing in terms of where to land, and that's here a nice beautiful touchdown, and obviously a small screenshot has to be made. Now again, back to fast forward footage, since the previous parts were actually in real time. Now going back to 4 times regular speed, since doing all the surface exploration is not necessary to be done in regular speed, since you can see everything anyways. So we deploy all the ladders, like for an Eve lander. You need ladders to get back into the craft, or, well, you can get down pretty much all the time, as you can see here with the second Kerbal. But going up again, we need the ladders. So we brought our 2 nice and brave Kerbals here, posing for a nice picture, which is probably the thumbnail. Since I haven't done the thumbnail yet, I'm most likely going to use one of these pictures taken here on the surface, but you will know that better than I do. So anyways, that's details. By the way, if you have any things that you want me to do, some sort of mission or anything, just type it down in the comments below. I'm always happy to do some sort of challenges or missions that you want me to do. But yeah, one last thing before we actually going to take off. I was just about to take off, select the target, waited for a nice window in terms of the main ship right above us in its orbit, but I decided let's spend one, and there will be actually two, Tylo days on the surface and just having a look at the beautiful horizon over there, where you can see Val and Lathe flying right next to us a couple of times. It is very a beautiful sight to behold. And now I think about it, I've read it recently in in the KSP Reddit that someone's criticized me for not using any visual mods, just stock. So the only mod I have installed, as you can see here, is Kerbin alarm clock in the upper right corner. And visual mods are definitely something very interesting, so I might actually at some point in the future install the visual mods again. But anyways, back to the footage on screen. We're taking off, and shortly after the first initial liftoff, we ditched those 4 side boosters, which gave pretty much all the most of the thrust. But since we detached them now, the Cheetah engine is enough to provide more than 1.2 a thrust to weight ratio of more than 1.2, and that's enough. Just keeping your nose or your your vector where you're burning towards above the horizon at around 20-25 degrees barely, to not drop down too close to the surface back, otherwise we'll crash. But generally speaking, as you can see here, we did now this first Cheetah stage. Now we're back to an LV9 light Harrier stage with the capsule and some fuel tanks, so very light stage, a lot of Delta V, so I would really suggest you building some or using this sort of setup as well. It is extremely powerful, so I'm very happy with that kind of uppermost stage of the lander. And now we're just going to do a nice and simple rendezvous, and since I've done more than enough rendezvous videos on this channel, if you haven't seen those, go check out colonization series or my Kerbin 101 series, where I even talk about how to do a nice rendezvous. So I'm just going to skip forward to the docking process itself. So just nice rendezvous, docking to the main craft with the small junior docking ports, since we still got those exactly for this purpose, transferring some of the excess fuel, even though we totally don't need that, dropping the periapsis down so that the command pod will crash and we won't leave that floating around, and then it's time to head home for Kerbin. Well, actually first heading out of the sphere of influence of Tylo, and then I can't be bothered to plot another gravity assist or other fiddly thingies, and that was just, we have 4 now, or was it 6,000, I'm not quite sure anymore. So we have just enough Delta V to do a raw aggressive burn, so that's what we went for, aggressive encounter with Kerbin. And just around Kerbin I was spent all of the remaining fuel to slow down in order to make the descent or re-entry actually into the Kerbin's atmosphere not too hot. But as you can see here, now the capsule is plummeting down 3 atmosphere, parachutes are deployed, and with that the mission is a complete and perfect success, apart from this tiny hiccup there on Tylo, but thankfully we have some F9. So in this note, I hope you enjoyed today's mission, and until next time, Spaceship signing out.